In this presentation, we'll talk about how to analyze speeches and visuals. By the end of this presentation, you should be able to compare rhetorical strategies for analyzing written arguments with strategies used for analyzing speeches and visuals. Though writing classes generally place more emphasis on analyzing written arguments, it's also important to consider arguments that are delivered in other modes, such as speeches and visuals. In many ways, speeches and visuals are analyzed much like written arguments. As with any analysis, speeches and visuals require you to break down the work into parts and closely examine those parts in order to better understand the work as a whole. Like written arguments, both formats should be analyzed rhetorically in order to determine if their arguments are successful. When analyzing speeches and visuals, be sure to examine the creator's purpose, audience, tone, and context, how the work uses structure and style, and how the work uses ethical, emotional, and logical appeals. To learn more about these common rhetorical devices, watch my presentation called Analyzing Arguments. Though elements of speeches and visuals are analyzed very similarly to those of written arguments, there are also some key differences that you should keep in mind. Let's start by talking about analyzing speeches. The purpose of speeches varies depending on the contextual situation or occasion and the audience. For example, the best man at a wedding might make a toast to both entertain the guests and honor the union. A tour guide at a museum often prepares a speech that informs visitors about a particular exhibit. And a commencement speech is often given in front of students and their families to celebrate academic achievements. Speeches can also be very powerful methods for persuasion. In war, a general might give a speech to motivate his troops. A political activist speech could expose a societal injustice in order to persuade a public crowd to change their way of thinking, while a debate may aim to justify a candidate's opinion and persuade potential voters to vote a particular way. In this way, the context of a speech may play a significant role in its overall purpose. Think about how the speech may be responding to certain historical, political, or cultural conditions. One way that speeches differ from written arguments is that written arguments address the audience indirectly. Even if writers personally know who they are writing for, they are not usually present when their audience reads the work. Speeches, on the other hand, often address a physical audience, giving the reader physical benefits, such as making eye contact and working with the audience's reactions to make adjustments to the speech in real time, which allows for a more up-close and personal connection. Like written arguments, speeches also use tone to accomplish their purpose. However, while written arguments depend heavily on word choice to reveal tone, speakers have the added benefit of being able to modulate their voices, use body language, and use stage presence to emphasize their points. In addition, speakers can set the tone by the way that they dress. Professional clothing may indicate a formal speech, while casual clothing may help the speaker connect to the audience in a more informal way. Speakers can use a wide range of tones. They can be formal, conversational, mournful, angry, or even comical, depending on their purpose. They can also easily shift tones to provide more emphasis by speaking loudly or softly, or by using dramatic hand gestures or moving around on the stage. While some formal essays often stick to using the third-person point of view, it's almost always appropriate to use the first-person point of view when giving a speech, because the speaker is quite literally inserted into the conversation. Arguments presented in speeches closely resemble written arguments. Both tend to use structures with clearly distinguishable sections, an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. However, whereas written arguments can use paragraphs to break up information into separate ideas, speakers must rely on other methods to organize their speeches. When starting a speech, it's important to grab the audience's attention quickly in order to encourage them to stick around and listen. A great way for a speaker to connect with the audience is to frame the overall thesis or claim as a question, an inclusive stylistic strategy that invites the audience to participate in the conversation and stimulates their curiosity. The introduction should also give the audience an indication as to what the main talking points will be. Then, as the speaker continues into the body of the speech, the talking points should be clearly stated again, serving as cues to the audience that he or she is moving to the next point, much like topic sentences in a written argument. As with argumentative writing, speakers can develop style through diction and language. A common stylistic technique often used in speeches is the repetition of particular words or phrases to drive a point home or add emphasis. Finally, rather than simply summarizing what has already been said in the speech, the speaker should offer a forward-looking statement in the conclusion by briefly discussing how the information provided in the speech can be applied in some way. For example, a persuasive speech might end with a call to action that encourages the audience to do something or change their way of thinking. Good speeches also use a variety of rhetorical appeals that should be analyzed similarly to those in written arguments. Follow the same guidelines discussed in the Analyzing Arguments presentation to determine how a speech should use ethical appeals to establish reputation, credibility, and/or authority, emotional appeals to tap into the audience's feelings, and logical appeals to convince the audience that what is being said in the speech is both true and reasonable. When analyzing a speech, consider whether the speaker uses a tone that is appropriate to the contextual situation, occasion, and audience. Also think about how well the speaker makes on-the-fly adjustments to the speech according to the audience's reactions, along with how the speech uses structure, style, and rhetorical appeals. Each of these elements plays a part in determining whether the speech successfully completes its purpose, and each can be the focus of a speech analysis essay. Next, we'll talk a little bit about analyzing visuals. Every day, we are bombarded with visuals on our phones, computers, tablets, and TVs that seek to sell us either products or ideas. Due to advances in technology such as location tracking and internet cookies, marketing strategies are more targeted than ever, which can be overwhelming for the average consumer. This is one reason why it's important to understand how rhetoric is used in the development of such visuals. Both print and video visuals, like advertisements, public service announcements, and political cartoons, can be analyzed similarly to written arguments and speeches, but they have two main differences. They are structured much differently, and they include additional design elements that should be considered. When analyzing a visual, first take a minute to simply look at it, or if it's a video, watch it, read any text, and note any general first impressions that stand out. Then, determine the visual's overall purpose. For the most part, advertisements attempt to persuade people to buy a product. Public service announcements are used to inform the public by raising awareness about an issue, and political cartoons are used to persuade people to think a certain way about politics or politicians. When analyzing a visual, your goal should be to determine how successfully it accomplishes its purpose. Next, determine the visual's audience and context. Often, the audience of a visual is directly related to where it's published or what product it's trying to sell. For example, an ad for men's deodorant in Men's Health magazine likely targets men. Political cartoons depend greatly on current political, social, and cultural context and are generally published in media sources like newspapers. The next step is to consider the visual's use of design and images. Note what catches your eye first. Think about how color, lighting, symmetry, and space might be used to add to the visual's message, either to create a mood or tone, serve as symbolism, or draw your eye to a particular spot. For example, the use of dark colors could give the visual a somber mood. The color red in a Valentine's Day advertisement might symbolize roses, hearts, or love, and stark contrasting colors or open spacing in the design may be used to draw your eye to an image or line of text. Visuals also tend to use particular images that may contribute to the overall message. For example, an image of a sad dog might convince the audience to donate to an animal shelter. If there are people in the visual, note details such as their race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, age, gender, facial expressions, or body types and positions, and decide if they play a role in the visual's purpose. An image of a happy, carefree, pretty person drinking soda on the beach might persuade the audience to buy that soda. Likewise, consider how text or spoken words might be used in the visual's design. Your eyes are naturally drawn to larger text first, while smaller text is often used for less important details. Finally, consider how the visual uses ethical, emotional, and logical appeals to contribute to its purpose, either through its design or its text. A public service announcement that warns of the dangers of sexual assault appeals to ethics because it demonstrates that it has the audience's best interests in mind. Additionally, because it uses statistical facts about the issue from an academic study, it has a strong logical appeal. Plus, it appeals to the audience's emotions because it makes the audience feel empathy for women who are assaulted. Also, think about how visuals that include celebrities, such as famous sports players, music artists, movie stars, or political figures, might appeal to the audience. In conclusion, both speech and visuals can be analyzed by taking a closer look at many of the same rhetorical elements that are used in an analysis of a written argument, but they also require you to examine additional rhetorical elements that are specific to their format. Analyzing speeches and visuals in this way can lead to a deeper understanding of their overall purpose or message and help you recognize how rhetorical elements are used in everyday life. Let's review. In this presentation, we discussed how to compare rhetorical strategies for analyzing written arguments with strategies used for analyzing speeches and visuals. Thanks for watching.